Hello and welcome to our webinar on school bullying. Thank you for joining us today. If you have any technical difficulties, please let us know in the chat box and we would hopefully be able to address any issues. And as I mentioned earlier, the slides will be shared with everyone via email, and the webinar will also be recorded so you can watch it later and or share it with friends and colleagues. So in light of rising incidents of hate crimes and discrimination in schools, we wanted to create a space for parents and educators and administrators and advocates to learn a little bit more about the subject and what folks can do. So today we will be talking about how to recognize bullying, how to report bullying, what the school and district's responsibilities are in cases of bullying, how to engage your community, and what parents can do. It's a lot of information. So I'm getting some messages that you can't hear anything. Hold on. If you're able to hear me, can you type in into the chat box just to confirm? I'm just trying to figure out. Okay, so you can hear. Great, you guys can hear us. So sorry about that. We can start over from the beginning. Thank you for joining us at today's webinar on school bullying. Today we're going to be discussing and learning more about how to recognize bullying, how to report bullying, what the school and district's responsibilities are, how to engage your community, and what parents can do if your child is being bullied. So it's a lot of information. We'll be sharing these slides and the handouts with you via email. They'll also be posted on our website, and the webinar will also be recorded. So before we begin, a quick introduction. My name is Natasha Quiroga. I am Prep Manager and Senior Counsel of the Educational Opportunities Project at the Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights Under Law. I have been managing our PREP program, or the Parental Readiness and Empowerment Program, for the past 6 years. Before that, I worked at an education law firm advising state departments of education on federal education law, and then before that, I ran a small grassroots nonprofit that focused on empowerment and education programs for Latino immigrant families. And we're also joined by Michelle, who will introduce herself right now.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me? Great. My name is Michelle Nutter, and in my role with the Center for Safe Schools, I provide training and technical assistance to schools on a variety of safety and youth violence prevention topics. With over 24 years experience in both education and civil rights law enforcement, I work with schools to ensure their compliance with state and federal civil rights and education laws. I am a certified Olveus bullying prevention program trainer and would like to acknowledge some of the information in the slides is taken from the Olveus bullying prevention program.
Great, thanks. We're so glad that Michelle is able to join us today. So a brief description on our organizations. PREP, or the Parental Readiness and Empowerment Program, is an initiative of the Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights Under Law. And the purpose of PREP is to improve student performance, reduce the racial achievement gap, and provide access to equal educational opportunities. And we work to help parents become more involved with their children's education. And we do that by providing parent advocacy guides, workshops, and educational consultation clinics, along with webinars and video tutorials on a number of subjects like special education, school discipline, English language learner issues, and discrimination and parent advocacy. We also work to ensure that parents have the tools to advocate for their children so that they have access to a quality education and greater educational opportunity. And just a quick disclaimer that we offer helpful information, but it's not considered legal advice. We try to be accurate, but rules can change and may vary by state and district. And you can check out more of our resources at our website at prepparents.org.
And I'm representing two organizations today. First, the Center for Safe Schools. We are recognized by the U.S. Department of Education, the U.S. Department of Justice, and the Office of Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention, along with the National Crime Prevention Council, as one of 20 statewide school safety centers in the nation. I'm also representing the Center for Education Equity. This is one of 4 regional technical assistance centers funded by the U.S. Department of Education's Office for Civil Rights to provide training and technical assistance to public school districts in the areas of race, gender, national origin, and religion in order to promote equal educational opportunities.
So before we begin, we'll start with a couple of polls just to see who is on the webinar right now. So if you could just fill out these questions. The first is, how big of a problem is bullying in your child's school? Is it a really big problem that happens all or most days? Is it a kind of big problem that happens 1 or 2 times a week? Is it not that big of a problem? It only happens once or twice a week? Or is it not a problem at all? Bullying rarely or never happens. So if you could just select your answers here, and we'll keep the poll open and get as many responses as possible so we can really get a sense on where we should focus the webinar. And then the second question is, has the level of bullying in your child's school gotten worse in the last 2 months? And the answer options would be yes, no, or not sure. So we've got a good number of you guys voting, so we'll keep it open for 30 seconds longer. Let's see, so we have about 2/3 of you voted, and oops, let me close it right now. It looks like bullying in your child's school is kind of a big problem that happens 1 or 2 times a week, is the majority response, followed by it's not that big of a problem. In terms of whether bullying has increased or not, the majority of you said not sure, with actually an even level saying yes and no. So this is helpful to us just to get a better sense. And if you want to type in the chat box and just let us know whether you are a parent, a teacher, an administrator, or a community advocate, that would give us a better sense as well. And if you also have any questions, feel free to type it in the chat box and we'll do our best to respond in the moment. But we will also have some time at the end of the webinar to respond to any questions. So with that, I'll turn it over to Michelle to review how to recognize bullying.
Okay. So it's important that when we talk about bullying that we all kind of have a same starting point for that discussion. And before we can respond to what bullying looks like in our school or among children that we serve, we need to consider attitudes and notions that we might harbor about who is involved, what bullying is or what it looks like, where it happens, how it impacts everyone involved in the situation, and why it might continue despite our efforts to try to stop it. We know that societal attitudes and misconceptions about bullying surround us and play a role in how we view bullying and how we respond, or even whether or not we do respond. So let's go on to the next slide, and what we're going to do is look at what bullying is. It's important to have that common understanding of what bullying is and what it isn't. This slide shows the most recent definition of bullying that was put out by the Center for Disease Control and Prevention in 2014. And it follows most of the traditional components of definitions of bullying, including the Olweus definition of bullying. But I want to highlight a few points. First of all, the behavior is unwanted. It is mean. It is intended to inflict harm or distress on the targeted child or children. There is either an observed or perceived power imbalance. A power imbalance has been in the definition of bullying to discern it from other types of behaviors such as conflict in the past. But it's important to note that this power imbalance can be perceived or it can be real. And third, I'd like to point out that prior definitions talked about behaviors being repeated, and the CDC added in this idea that it's likely to be repeated. We need to remember that adults need to intervene in any inappropriate behavior, even if it's the first time that they witness the behavior. Bullying behavior doesn't have to be repeated for us to consider it as bullying. One incident alone can be very distressful and very largely impact the child who is targeted. So we all have probably heard this a million times before. There's really three types of bullying. The first, direct bullying, it's the in-your-face bullying. And adults are most familiar with direct bullying and are most able to respond to it. Examples can include threats and mean gestures. And when we look at school policies around bullying, most of them hit on this direct bullying, these very observable types of behaviors. We know that statistically, boys engage in direct bullying more often than do girls, but girls do use direct bullying tactics as well. Indirect bullying. This is the area where we see girls using this type of bullying more frequently than do the boys, although boys do as well. Indirect bullying is sometimes referred to as relational aggression. And this type of behavior is much harder to detect. It's much harder to discipline as well, because a lot of it could involve even facial expressions, rolling your eyes at someone that is done to hurt someone else's feelings, but it's really hard for a teacher or a parent to be able to know if the child did in fact roll their eyes or what the eye rolling was even about. But with this type of indirect bullying, the child who's doing the bullying is frequently nice to the target's face, but may engage in mean, harmful behaviors behind their back. And so examples include gossip and exclusion or friendship manipulation. And the last area we'll talk about is cyberbullying. And it's bullying that uses some type of technology to get the message across. And in some ways we can say that the cyberbullying activity can be both direct, like taunting or teasing or threatening someone, or indirect, where you're spreading rumors or excluding folks from online forums and things. Cyberbullying is a newer frontier, and definitely we see an increase in that behavior, although face-to-face bullying still is more prevalent than cyberbullying. But the cyberbullying piece is difficult, especially for schools when they try to figure out if the bullying has come into the school and is therefore something that they need to discipline, or if it truly remains that external communication that doesn't impact the school environment. So this is a slide right from the Ulvaeus Bullying Prevention Program, and it's a great example of making sure that when we think about bullying situations, we think about every student, every adult who sees or takes part in the bullying. We all play a role in bullying. Some of them are positive roles. People who dislike bullying and stand up for the bullied student, or who help the bullied student after the fact. And some of the roles are more negative, like the ones who are actually starting or joining into the bullying, or somehow stirring the pot to increase the bullying. As you can see, we have some folks who actively participate, others who support passively, some who passively object, and some who actively object to the bullying. And please keep in mind that these roles aren't always fixed. A child who bullies today may be bullied tomorrow, or a child who is bullied in one setting or with one group of students may be a bystander in another setting or group of students. Natasha, I think we have a polling question. Or do you want me to just keep on going?
Sorry, I think we're having trouble with it. So if you want to just...
Okay, I'll just keep on talking.
Type it in, that would be great.
Okay, so the point that we really want you to focus on is that bullying is not a rite of passage. Bullying is not just kids being kids. Bullying truly is a form of victimization or peer abuse, and it shares characteristics such as that repetitive nature and the power imbalance with other forms of victimization, including domestic violence and child maltreatment. Remember, bullying is not conflict. Conflict is when two parties who are on pretty much the same footing and they have a disagreement or an argument or a fight about something. Bullying is not conflict. It is, as we've already said, there's this power imbalance. And so if we respond to bullying the same way that we respond to conflict, we can really damage that situation even more. And we send inappropriate messages to the children who are victimized by bullying, almost as if we are saying that it's their fault that they're being bullied. So we need to think about bullying as peer abuse and treat it as such. We know that everyone who sees or is aware of or targeted by or doing the bullying is negatively impacted. Research bears out the fact that every single student, whether they're the target, whether they're the bystander, or whether they are the child who's engaging in bullying, they all have negative impacts from that experience. And recent research indicates that children who've been bullied can carry those impacts well into adulthood. So the bottom line here is that this damage can be physical, emotional, and or psychological, and it can result in trauma for folks well into later years in their lives. Again, we need to remember that bullying is a form of abuse. So as I said before, bullying is not the same thing as conflict. And we often hear that bullying and conflict are the same thing, and so we can do conflict mediation between two kids who are engaged in bullying. And that just is not the best way to handle bullying. Conflict resolution or mediation strategies send messages that both children are partly right or partly wrong, and that we need to work it out between the two of you to find common ground. It's inappropriate to use this message in bullying or in any situation where someone is being victimized. Instead, the appropriate message to the child who is bullied is that bullying is wrong and no one deserves to be bullying, and that we, the adults in the situation, are going to do everything in our power to make sure that the bullying stops. And finally, again, just to credit the Olweus Bullying Prevention Program for this great chart. Often we hear folks say, well, how can I tell if it's bullying, or, is it just kids playing together in a rough way, or is it real fighting? And I think that this chart really is helpful as we look at the differences between the two. We look at whether or not the children are friends. We look at whether or not there's an imbalance of power. We look at whether there's intent on the part of one or more children to do harm. And then finally, we looked at the affect of the children, their facial expressions or their body language. And I truly believe that last category, the facial expressions and body language of the children involved, tell a huge part of the story. So when we're looking at rough play, children are happy. They're laughing and smiling, and their body language is very relaxed towards each other. In real fights, the kids are both angry and hostile. They will both have really mean expressions on their faces, and their body language is going to be aggressive, posturing, trying to throw a punch at each other. But both faces and both body languages will be very similar in that anger. But in bullying situations, the children will show very different facial expressions and body language. The student who's doing the bullying will look smug or contrite, depending on how he or she wants to portray his actions, right? The student that's targeted by the bullying is going to look quite different. They're going to look sad or embarrassed or dejected or depressed or hurt. Their body language will be that of someone to avoid being hurt. They may hunch their shoulders in and refuse to make eye contact, and they're going to try to get away from the other child as much as possible. So really looking at that body language and facial expression can give us some clues into the dynamic that's going on in a situation.
Okay, thanks, Michelle. That was a good overview of how to recognize bullying. So now we're going to go into what a school's responsibilities are. Now, schools have a responsibility to create safe learning environments for all students. And when that bullying or harassment is based on a protected class and creates a hostile environment, schools have an obligation under federal civil rights laws to take action. The U.S. Department of Education's Office for Civil Rights has issued guidance previously on addressing the issues of harassment and bullying. They have a wide variety of resources available that goes into much more detail than we have time for. So you can check out the website stopbullying.gov for more details, and it includes a lot of information related to the investigation and response to bullying and harassment and how schools should respond. What we're going to cover today, we'll review the basics of a school's responsibilities to students who are being bullied or harassed based upon a protected class. So the most important thing is that when kids bully each other, and the basis of that bullying is because of a student's protected class, schools must act they must react, and they're obligated by law to take action. Schools have a duty to intervene in these situations. The U.S. Department of Education's guidance provides that under federal law, schools have a duty to protect students from harassment. In our email to you, we'll include a link to a video that goes in detail about this and is a good resource for those of you who are working in schools or who are parent advocates and educators. Essentially, the video includes information that when a child is harassed, schools must look at the activity and ask, is it severe, pervasive, and offensive? Has the child been denied educational benefits? And this would include situations where a student skips school or skips class to avoid the harassing situation, and also where a student might mentally check out during class because they're trying to come up with ways to protect themselves or to avoid the harassment or bullying. They're not able to receive instruction that's being provided, and then their academic achievement may suffer. And the school must also ask, or I guess when we're considering whether the child is harassed, did the school or district know or should have known about the hostile environment? So, because when schools are aware of the harassment, they're obligated to stop it. If a student or parent files a complaint, or if a staff member observes it happening, the school is on notice that the harassment is occurring and must then act. But it's important to note that all action is not created equal. So if a school fails to respond, or if they respond in an inadequate or an unreasonable way, the schools, and in some cases individual teachers and administrators, may be found liable for deliberate indifference. And that's the last question, is was the school or district deliberately indifferent to the need to take action to stop the harassment? So let's review what the protected classes are. So these are the general categories listed here. There's a mistaken belief that only certain people are covered, but as you can see here, the statutes cover every race, every color, every religion. And when people of one group are treated differently than people in other groups, discrimination is occurring. Schools are obligated, as we mentioned before, to provide students with a harassment-free learning environment. And failure to address bullying of students who fall under these certain protected classes opens the door to complaints being filed with the U.S. Department of Education's Office for Civil Rights, or OCR, and the U.S. Department of Justice, or possibly state agencies. Additionally, victims might have a legal right of action to civilly sue districts for failure to protect their students, among other possible claims. So this is true not only for racial bullying, but bullying which targets any of the protected classes listed on this slide. Our civil rights laws protect students from harassment when it is based on their actual or perceived race, color, national origin, sex, which may include gender identity, gender expression, and pregnancy, religion, and disability. And so it's also important to note here that the actual or perceived. So even if the bullying student gets the race wrong of a student, it's the perceived race. So that would be classified under as a protected class. So here's a list of all of the different civil rights laws that provide protections to students who are victims of harassment based on protected classes. We're not going to go into details here, but I think it's helpful for everyone to know that there are several different civil rights statutes that provide protections of varying sorts, from the Civil Rights Act to the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. In addition, states may also have their own laws providing protections for students. And while Title IX and Title IV do not prohibit discrimination based solely on sexual orientation, they do protect all students, including students who are LGBT or perceived to be LGBT, from sex-based harassment. So if a school finds that harassment that has created a hostile environment has occurred, then immediate action must be taken to end the harassment, to eliminate the hostile environment, and prevent recurrence and retaliation. Failure to take these actions would likely be a violation of federal civil rights laws. This may include providing students who are being harassed with counseling, academic support services like tutoring and other services, and provided perpetrators of harassment with counseling and other services. While schools won't be able to prevent all harassment before it happens, they should still create safe school climates that support positive behavior and let the community know that harassment and other forms of discrimination will not be tolerated. So that was a very quick overview of what the district and schools' responsibilities are in terms of bullying of students in these protected classes. So now we're going to jump right into what happens when bullying takes place. And I see there's a question. Yes, the question is about the PowerPoint. Yes, the slides for the PowerPoint will be shared with everyone. Especially the one with the civil rights statutes. I'm sorry we can't go into all the details of the statutes, just given the amount of time. We do have a lot of different videos provided on our YouTube channel at youtube.com/prepparents, which includes more specific information in a number of these statutes, as well as complaint procedures. And we'll include that information in the email that we send to everyone. So let's go further into now, what do you do if your child is being bullied at school, or what do you do if one of the parents that you work with thinks their child is being bullied? So there's a couple different routes, two main routes that we can go through. The first is informal complaint options, and that would mean talking to the child first to find out what happened. We advise parents to write down everything that happened or is continuing to happen, and that would include dates, times, places, potential witnesses, whether it's classmates or it's teachers, to the school secretary or janitor. If anybody saw anything, to include them, their names, and if teachers or school staff were informed, and if so, what their response was. Now you remember we talked earlier about what the school's responsibilities are. So remember, if the school has been put on notice, then they may ultimately be responsible for providing support to the child. Now, the next thing is to check to see if your school or district has an anti-bullying policy. A lot of districts have them, and it's important information that can provide details on what the school will do and possibly provide information on also who to contact. You can also talk to the child's teacher to find out more details of the incident or incidents. And you may also consider contacting the school counselor or principal if it's an ongoing issue or you need to get more school staff involved. If your district does have an anti-bullying policy, there may also be steps that you would need to follow, which may include following up with the superintendent or perhaps the school board. So we provide a letter or a template. Let me go to the next slide. That's a letter of concern that you can send to the school along with a sample of an incident report to demonstrate how parents or students might go about documenting incidents of bullying, harassment, and discrimination. It's, the school or the teachers may not have any idea of the full facts of what's been happening, or they might be unaware of its full effects. So parents may consider starting with these informal options to both gather and share facts related to the problematic conduct, whatever effects it might be having on the child, as well as potential solutions. Parents can talk with their child, document what's going on, and talk to teachers and guidance counselors. So here's the template, sample letter of concern. We'll be including it as well in our email that we send out to everyone. If the student is being bullied, harassed, or discriminated against, they should work with their parents to keep an accurate documentation of each incident. It's important for parents to send this documentation along with a letter of concern to the school to put them on notice. And parents should remember to keep a copy of the letter for their own records. You can send this to the principal, to the teacher, as well as to the teacher. The awareness is essential for moving toward a meaningful solution, and it triggers the school's obligation to take immediate steps to address the discriminatory conduct. And remember, the school may be liable if they know of the discriminatory conduct, are deliberately indifferent to the conduct, and if the conduct results in a hostile environment that impedes the student's access to educational benefit. So in terms of what types of records a parent should be keeping, you can see here just a quick example of one incident. So this would include what happened, when, the date, what time, who the witnesses were, was it reported to the school administrators, and if so, what was their response? So this would be included in the letter of concern that was sent to the school. And you know, this is just one incident. You would probably be including multiple incidents as well. So what happens if you've submitted this letter of concern and the school either doesn't respond or you feel like the school is not doing enough? So then we would go through our more formal options, filing official complaints. Depending on whether the student being bullied is a member of one of the protected classes, parents may have the option to file formal complaints under state and federal laws. Parents who claim a violation of a federal anti-discrimination law may file a complaint with the U.S. Department of Education's Office for Civil Rights and/or submit a complaint to the Department of Justice. Parents who claim a violation of state anti-discrimination laws, bullying, or harassment laws may file a complaint with their school district. They may also be able to file a lawsuit in state or federal court based on claims of discrimination. But the important thing to note here is that these processes take a lot of time, and they might not have an immediate result to the bullying situation. But your district's anti-bullying policy may have more detailed complaint procedures at the district level, so it's important, again, to find out more info there. So what happens, let's say a parent files a complaint with a school district, your child has been found to be harassed based on one of the protected classes. Now what happens? So the school, appropriate responses from the school will depend on the exact facts of each case, but the school must be an active participant in responding to harassment and must take reasonable steps in crafting remedies to minimize the burden on the targeted students. So what can parents do? So we have a lot of this information in terms of what parents are able, how you're supposed to report it as a parent. But we can focus on if, and some of this information is very similar, if you think your child is being bullied, talking with your child, getting all the information, getting all of the facts, and documenting everything, as well as focusing on what strategies are useful to keep your child safe at school and to develop a safety plan for your child with the school. So this means talking to teachers, talking to school counselors, and making sure that they are aware of the situation. Now, in the interest of time, we're just going to focus on the few key points on the next few slides, but you'll again have these PowerPoint slides so you can review them later. So let's focus here. It's important to have clear expectations when you talk with your child's school, whether it's in your letter, putting them on notice, or in an actual meeting. But let the school know exactly what it is you're requesting. For example, you want the situation to be investigated, or you want to hear back from the school about their findings and their plan to address the issue within 2 weeks, or you would like the school to increase surveillance of the identified students or situation. So it's important to just be very clear in what you are requesting so the school has a better sense of what it is that you want. And while you may want to know, or parents may want to know, parents will likely not be told how the other child was disciplined in these situations. It's important to keep your focus on what needs to be done to keep the child safe at the school. And if things do improve and get better for your child, let the school know. They need to hear the positive outcomes and know what solutions are possibly working. So what happens if you think your child is the one that is the bully? It's important to discuss bullying and their impacts and to set clear rules at home and to let children know that bullying is wrong and that it won't be accepted, to provide consequences for bullying, and importantly, to learn about what your bullying policies are at the school and district, and to meet with school staff and to find out more about how your child is doing. And it's important also to model the behavior that you would expect from your child in school. So showing respect to others and solving problems without aggression. It's also important to discuss with your child what would happen if she or he observes bullying. We talked a lot about witnesses, and whether or not children feel comfortable speaking up is another issue. So that's why it's helpful to go through these various steps on this slide and the next slide, so that children feel comfortable either speaking up for another child who they see is being bullied, or at least to report it to a teacher or to a school counselor. You can also talk with your child about various outcomes and maybe practice responses that they can share with, so that they feel more comfortable. But the important thing to note is that if your child is telling you about some escalating negative behaviors or violent behaviors at the school, then that might be some information that you would want to report to the proper school authorities. So the bottom line here is that if bullying was something that children could handle on their own, then the behavior wouldn't occur. But we as adults, and whether it's parents or teachers or advocates, should be there to provide the support that the children need to get through this difficult time. I'm going to skip ahead just in the interest of saving time to one quick scenario that Michelle will go through.
Okay, so the scenario that we have for you here is on the screen, but I'll read it for you. Hala is a fourth grader who is Muslim. She wears a hijab, which is a head covering, to school, as does her younger sister and cousin, who also go to that same school. When she was younger, kids asked Hala questions about her hijab and the food that she ate and her religion. But lately, they have started trying to pull her scarf off during recess and telling her she shouldn't wear it. They've been calling her a terrorist and making fun of the food that she eats. She has started to throw her lunch out rather than deal with the bullying. So we have a couple questions for you. And the first one is, how is Hala being bullied? Do you think she's being bullied? And if so, what are some of the behaviors in this scenario that would constitute that bullying?
So feel free to type in your thoughts in the chat box. Otherwise, Michelle can go on to the next question.
Okay. And so if we agree that it is bullying, and yes, someone typed in pulling at her scarf, the name calling, the teasing, absolutely. Those are all ways that she is being bullied. Making fun of her food, calling her a terrorist. Yes, you've got it, absolutely. So the next question then is, what part of her identity, or is there a protected class that's being targeted by this aggression? You are correct. Her religion is being targeted. Now, we don't have enough details here to know whether she is from the Middle East or of Middle Eastern descent. If that is true, there could also be some national origin or ancestry protected class obligations on the part of the school, but we don't know if that is true or not. But we definitely know that her religion is being targeted, and her gender as well, because Muslim males don't necessarily wear a hijab, so there could be gender discrimination going on there as well. The next question is, how do you think Hala feels in this situation? Sure. She could have a range of feelings. She could be embarrassed. She could be ashamed. She could be sad. She could be frightened. She could feel misunderstood. She could be depressed. She might think that she's unattractive, or there's something wrong with her hair. Alone, excluded, sad. Yeah, these are great answers. You guys definitely got it. The next question is, what actions can be taken by Hala? What could Hala do here? We'll start there. Sure. Tell her parents, tell someone at school, a staff member, to let them know. Definitely telling parents and someone at home, so that we're sure that something is done about it. And you're right, Irma. You need courage to take that stand, but hopefully we have created a school climate where kids feel safe in reporting to us. And what about bystanders? What could they do in this situation? Sarah, you're right. Kids often don't want to talk to the parents about what's going on because they are afraid that they'll worry their parents. A lot of times we know that when kids are being cyberbullied, they don't want to talk to their parents because they're afraid they're going to lose their technology. So yeah, the other kids who see it should speak up. They should either take a stand for Hala directly and say, hey, we don't treat each other like that. Or they could go and report to someone else. And the teacher in the school, as Natasha said, they're obligated to stop this bullying, because in this case, Hala's civil rights are being violated. Religious harassment is illegal, and schools have a duty to intervene. And that last question there is, what should the parents do? And I see Lizette already said, visit the school, request a meeting. Absolutely. Make sure that the school knows what's going on and request information on how the school is addressing the situation. You're absolutely right, Irma. They may need diversity awareness training or cultural responsivity training as well. Start with the teacher if it's happening in the classroom, or go to a guidance counselor or principal. And if the school doesn't take the appropriate action, then Hala's parents should consider filing either a state or federal complaint, as Natasha had discussed a little bit ago. So thanks again to the Olweus Bullying Prevention Program here in talking about how we engage the community. Because bullying is a form of peer abuse and it's present in every type of community, it's important that we engage the community in how we address it. We are all in this together. We know that the community can help support schools' efforts in a variety of ways. We know that bullying doesn't stop once the kids get off the bus to go home. It happens anywhere that children gather together. So when we engage the community in anti-bullying efforts, then we have the same message in all their areas, that bullying is not acceptable and it won't be condoned. Bullying in the community, we know, can also affect kids at school, and strong community support can help to insulate the school from criticism. So next, why engage the community? Well, because we've already discussed that bullying is not a phenomenon that only occurs at schools. It happens throughout the community. And so if we want to get ahead of bullying and make a difference, we have to address it anywhere that children gather. Community groups can spread the message for us, and they can help us to do the work. And here's just some examples of communities, organizations that have an interest in bullying prevention and can be really great resources. Some of the supports they provide could include financial support, material support like goods or services, human beings. Sometimes we just need volunteers to help us do the work, and even public relations support. When we use our community resource sources to help spread the word, not just about our school's efforts, but the community at large, then we're able to engage many more people. The bottom line here is that we want our kids to be safe everywhere in the community. If we only address bullying in school, yeah, we can decrease bullying in school, but we might not see a decrease in bullying that happens other places. But when we engage the whole community and help folks understand why bullying is harmful, we have the ability to decrease bullying everywhere, not just in our schools. So remember, it takes a team. We are all in this together. We all need to work together for change to happen. And change can be something that happens in little steps, and it may take a long time for it to get to where we want it to be, but at the end of the day, we do see that positive increase. The success of bullying prevention efforts depends on active involvement from everybody.
Thanks, Michelle. So we have one more scenario for everyone to do, but really quickly, because in the interest of time, we have 5 more minutes. I wanted to review some additional resources. If you are located in the state of California, PrEP offers our e-clinic or virtual clinic where parents can video chat with our trained pro bono attorneys on education issues. And one of the issues that they focus on is discrimination and bullying. So, but this is right now only available in the state of California. We'll be expanding to New York in the end of this month, and in Minnesota this spring, and then in Mississippi later this fall. So the information is here if you have interest or need that. We also provide support on special ed, discipline, and English learner issues. So before we take our evaluation, let's review really quickly the second scenario about Carlos. He's a 10th grader, and he and his family recently moved to your school from the Dominican Republic. He receives ELL support, and while he can speak some English, he's not comfortable communicating in English. The other students make fun of Carlos because of his accent and grammatical errors, and a group of boys call him names and tell him they can't wait for him to be deported. Recently, the boys tripped Carlos when he passed them in the halls. So how is Carlos being bullied? Physical, verbal abuse, that's right. They're tripping him, they're calling him names, they're making fun of his accent. And then that identity that some of you already identified could be his race or his nationality. And one thing that we didn't really focus on is language here. If they're making fun of his accent, that can be considered fall under the protected class of national origin as well. So how do you think Carlos feels after this is all taking place? Probably not very happy, maybe not just embarrassed, but also scared if they're telling him they can't wait for him to be deported. Maybe he doesn't know his status, his immigration status, or that of his parents. Probably feels very alone and he doesn't belong at school. That's right. So what actions can be taken by Carlos, any other bystanders, his teacher, or the school? So Carlos could perhaps talk to, maybe he has other friends in his ELL class. He could maybe talk to the teacher of his class as well. His friends could, yeah, like somebody said, defend him when they see any of this taking place at school. Now, what should Carlos's parents do? And Irma brings up a good point for the parents to request an interpreter in order to express the situation. And this is kind of key, especially in situations of bullying against students who don't speak English or whose parents don't speak English, and the challenges and barriers that they face in reporting bullying to the school. So it's important, that's why I'm sure all of you are well aware as advocates, to ensure that parents feel comfortable speaking to school staff, as well as have access to interpreters and translators. So thank you all so much for your participation today. We have two versions of our survey. One is a quick poll that you can do right now. And then the other one is let's see, sorry, not this one. I'm trying to go to the next question. Here we go. You could do this survey quick right now, whether or not you found this webinar helpful, whether you'll be able to use the webinar to support your children or your students or the children of parents you work with if you work in the schools, and if you'll be more confident in your ability to advocate for your child. We'll also post the link to this SurveyMonkey in the email that we send out to you that has a more detailed responses, examples that you can provide, as well as a question related to what else do you want to learn about, because we are always interested in providing resources for advocates and parents on information that you're looking into learning more about. So thank you so much for your participation. We'll stay on for a couple of minutes more if you have other questions. And we hope this information was useful to you, the parents that you work with, and your children. So thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone.